Hello, lovely people of the internet. This is Brian from NintendoEverything.com, and you're listening to Just the Chat. I'm joined by Austin to talk about all the major Nintendo news that came in today. And Austin, you're back.
I am back. I'm not Nintendan. I'm not as informed or accented as him. You two have been holding down the fort really, really well with Just a Chat, so I've enjoyed listening to the first two. And I don't know if you'll continue, but I hope you do.
We probably will, but it's nice to have you back as well from time to time.
I was around. There was like a little bit of news, so I figured we would jump in. Just kidding. You came up with the idea.
Alright, but let's get started with today's news, because there's quite a bit to talk about. Not so much in the way of details, but still big news. And in the wee hours of the morning, that's a bad joke right there.
Oh, Jesus. I was awake for this, so you were actually giving me the news at 4 in the morning. You woke up for me.
Well, technically, it was Dennis who got the news first, and then I came on at like 4:45 and just stayed up and covered everything after that. But basically, we heard of that a conference was going to happen with DeNA, which is basically, I guess the easiest way to put it is a mobile company. And we didn't know what they were going to talk about, and as soon as this presentation began, we learned that this partnership had formed between Nintendo and DeNA.
Yeah.
And basically, they're calling it a business and capital alliance, but it goes much deeper than that, because now we know that the two are going to partner together and make games basically for smart devices.
Yeah, and just to get the most important thing out of the way, is it pronounced DNA? Because I was calling it DeNA all morning.
I think it is DeNA.
So I have no... If it's DNA, great. But yeah, they made a... I looked into them a little bit because I'd never heard of them, because they mostly operate in Japan. And they basically have like a sort of a Steam-like platform for mobile games called Mobage, where basically developers will publish games on these platforms, and it's sort of like a mix of a gaming platform and a social media thing where people share things. So, yeah, they've basically been doing that for a while, and Nintendo decided that I guess there would be some sort of mutually beneficial relationship if they partnered up. So, but they're not the biggest. I mean, they're not a game developer themselves, and I think that was one of the more interesting things. Like, this isn't similar to their partnership with Gung Ho for Puzzle and Dragons, you know?
Right.
Because they're a game developer. DeNA, if that's how you pronounce it, if you are not lying to me, making me look like a fool. But
I might be the fool, but
now we're both fools. So they made a platform for gaming. I don't know if they've made any games themselves. Just quickly looking it up, it doesn't appear that they've made any of the games themselves. So that's interesting. I don't know. I guess that sort of puts in perspective the whole idea that they're going to create sort of a social platform for all their devices, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, but basically, we're going to see that any Nintendo character can be put onto a smart device now.
Anyone. And that they were very, very clear that I think Iwata's words were something close to any and all IPs will be considered for this collaboration. So we won't necessarily see something from every franchise that Nintendo's put out, but they will at least consider every single franchise they've done. I mean, so things all the way up from Mario down to Pikmin down to, with any luck, something like maybe we could get a new Cat Trap or something, because I don't think we're getting that on 3DS anyway, so I'll take Cat Trap on a phone.
And it's not going to be too long before we start seeing things, because apparently the first games are coming out this year.
And I think most people, at least I shouldn't say most people, I don't know that many people, but me, I was surprised that they were so aggressive with this. I thought Iwata was going to kind of like stave off the investors and then come out with a new console and hopefully be successful. But this is a really, really genuine commitment to this kind of platform with someone who knows what they're doing, at least in an economic sense. Like, the DeNA has become very popular and they make a lot of money, so... Though I suppose, to keep it in perspective, they both own 22 billion yen worth of stock, I think, in each other's company. It's sort of part of the deal to make sure they both have a stake in how the other one, turns out.
Yeah, if you want to get into the business aspect of it, I guess we could talk about how Nintendo is acquiring 10% of DeNA's outstanding stock, and DeNA is acquiring 1.2%.
Right, and that was the thing. That puts it in perspective how big DeNA as a company is compared to Nintendo, just in terms of the amount of shares they have. Because 22 billion of DeNA is 10%, and 22 billion of Nintendo is, I think, what, 2% you just said? One and a half?
About that, 1.24%.
Yeah, so... It's there's definitely a difference, and I think DeNA is probably thrilled about this because there's a lot of competition in their space, and to team up with someone like Nintendo who has really, really good brand recognition will probably do them a whole lot of good. But I don't really know a whole lot about them. I mean, I looked up a little bit of a few of the games that are on that platform, and they're not. That's really all I know. They have a Steam-like platform, and Nintendo said we're getting in on that. So it's been an interesting morning, to say the least.
Yeah, but I think the main, well, I don't want to say main, but one of the big reasons why Nintendo wanted to do this partnership, and you were kind of getting into it, was for that membership service.
Right.
So,
that was going to be sort of the third pillar of the whole thing. Like, there were three big announcements, and yeah, that was sort of the second of them that we heard about. They want to make a social platform for their devices and smartphones. So I don't know what you think about that or what other details we know, but you probably know them better than me. You posted.
Well, to me, it sounds more like a Club Nintendo replacement than it does a social platform.
I wondered about that, yeah. Because, I mean, do you think, would it really be worth partnering with someone like this for just a big Club Nintendo replacement? Because that's serving a small market, you know? Club Nintendo isn't a mass market social platform. It's for the hardcore Nintendo fans to get coins and sort of be slightly disproportionately rewarded for the thousands of dollars they've put into it, you know? So I would be skeptical if that's all it was, but that's what the rhetoric sounded like from earlier today, right? It was like, well, we want to create sort of a, well, I don't remember what the exact words they used for it, but yeah, that was the impression I got is, oh, Club Nintendo replacement. But then you look up what DeNA has done in the past, creating this sort of social platform where people can publish games across mobile devices, and maybe that's what Nintendo saw as appealing to them. Maybe they want some sort of continuity between a smartphone, a tablet, and then their new, you know, what we're going to assume, just because that's what everyone's been saying, is going to be some sort of hybrid handheld console next time around. So maybe that's what they're getting into. It's hard to say.
Yeah, a lot of the talk I've seen online has been about like a Club Nintendo replacement and how this will be used to manage accounts on the Wii U, 3DS, and across the smart devices, and what Nintendo has coming in the future.
You've got to imagine that's going to be one of the pillars of it, is having a unified account system, because we've been waiting on that for too many years at this point. But it just would seem weird to get into this kind of pretty serious business arrangement for something that relatively small. I mean, you could have just hired someone to do that for you, and then learning about that they're going to be developing games together and publishing games on these smart devices, and again, DeNA's history with platforms, with mobile platforms, not games, but platforms, makes me think there might be more to it than that. Makes me think they're looking for something that's more deeply integrated.
Maybe. Apparently, though, it's going to use DeNA's extensive experience and capabilities in online membership services. So they definitely have a lot of know-how and experience in terms of dealing with this kind of thing, and maybe that's why Nintendo thought they were appealing?
It's really going to come down to what they are trying to do, and we don't know. I mean, they're being very kind of opaque with, or Iwata is anyway, but he kind of always is, about what exactly this is going to end up looking like. And aside from saying we're going to use our IPs in mobile games and they're coming out before the end of the year, the actual, you know, what it's going to look like and how you're going to access it and how, you know, similar it's going to be to other things we've seen on smartphones or smart devices, we don't really know any of that. There's no way for us to sort of predict, because it very well could be something incredibly dedicated, or this could just be a sort of a superficial relationship, and maybe they don't actually care that much and they just want to, again, sort of, I mean, their stock went up, and that's, I think, part of the reason why they wanted to do this is for the sake of the investors, and maybe that's all it was, or maybe this is something more deliberate and important to them.
Right. At least in terms of the membership service, we should probably be hearing more soon, because it's coming out this fall, and that's not too far away.
Right, but if it was just a membership service, I mean, you've got it's going to have the staples, like some sort of Club Nintendo type thing, and then a unified account system, so then your purchases will be tied to an account rather than the device, and that's all good. But if that was the only reason they wanted to do this, why are they developing games with this company. So that makes me think there's something more going on. If I had to predict, I don't know if maybe we'll see a Nintendo version of Steam or something like that, but we might. I mean, it wouldn't be out of the question for them to create something called like the eShop Plus, or just call it the eShop and have that be like Nintendo's storefront, as Valve has Steam, and then there's a couple of other small ones. So even if all the games won't be played on all the devices, like you could see something sort of unifying all that, and maybe Miiverse kind of gets jumbled in with all of that rather than having it separate, and then you put it with Twitter and all the Facebook, and it could be one big whole happy family.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see where this goes and what Nintendo has planned.
Right. It's still I think surprisingly aggressive. I certainly wasn't expecting anything like this from Nintendo. On the other hand, DeNA has, I think they've partnered with, I think I read anyway about 10 minutes ago that they partnered with Disney and Sony and big companies like that. So it's not out of the question for them anyhow. But I think one of the biggest things, because all of the business stuff only affects people like us so much, right? Because we play games and we like them, and that's it. But do you think this is going to have some sort of long-term effect on how we're going to be enjoying Nintendo games? And will it affect, because Iwata's always talked about, we want to fight the devaluation of video games. That's like his biggest talking point, is not wanting to make $1 games all the time, and then sort of everyone goes towards $1 games. He wants to keep them expensive. Is there any concern that will sort of be breached when they go to a smart device?
Possibly, because you may have some concerns that they'll cannibalize what they're doing with the smart devices, and then that can have an impact on something that they're doing on like the 3DS.
Mm-hmm. Well, and are they just going to sort of have, like Microsoft has the Xbox division, and all the other divisions of Microsoft right now anyway are basically propping up their game division. And maybe that the dedicated game division of Nintendo is just going to sort of be something that they do because they're good at it, but it really won't be their main source of income, kind of like it is with Microsoft and, well, not Sony actually. Sony's game division does comparatively very well for them, but maybe we would end up seeing something like that, where they're going to publish a ton of games on phones, and then just for the core group of, 20 million people that want a dedicated platform, keep going in that direction, and then we'll just get GameCube after GameCube after GameCube.
I guess before we close out this portion of the talk, I'm just wondering, do you think this is a good idea overall in terms of the partnership and what Nintendo is going to be doing with the smart devices?
Well, it's hard to say. Like, in terms of business, I don't think I'm nearly qualified to speak on whether this is going to work for them long term. But in terms of, well, I guess the only metric I can use is, will this make people like me happy? Will we get games, and is this going to drastically change how we enjoy things? I don't know. This can go two ways, the way I see it. Either the first way is Nintendo uses smartphones as just another pillar to bring in revenue, and then the dedicated game division is relatively separate. But they do want this mobile platform that we know is going to tie dedicated gaming devices to mobile devices, right? We know that is something they want to do. So maybe the way they'll go is Iwata is going to attempt to be the shining knight in white shining armor for the devaluation of games and fight to make mobile platforms viable as a place to sell $5 or $10 or $15 games. So maybe they'll come out with something that's much better quality, or even, there's a lot of great quality $1 games on iPhone, but maybe they'll come out with something of a Nintendo style, put it on a smartphone, and hammer marketing or something with DeNA to the point that they can sell it for $15, and then maybe that sort of drives the value back up. And if I had to take a guess, I think that's probably where they're going to lean. Actually, I take that back. What's probably going to happen is they're just going to make a lot of Pokemon Shuffle type games for iOS, and then just make a little bit of money that way. But you could see them. Iwata has been very, very diligent about making sure games are. It seems like he cares about the value of games in a sort of a genuine way. I mean, he was a programmer, so that makes sense. But I wouldn't, maybe I wouldn't put it past him to try and go in and quote unquote save the mobile market from itself in the long run and team up with someone like DeNA to do that. But I don't know if that's really in Nintendo's capabilities right now. I'm not a business boy, so I can't say. But there's a lot of ways it could go, certainly.
I feel like the overall reaction from a gamer standpoint has been negative, but I think it's too early to kind of call it and say like, oh, this is a bad thing.
Of course.
For Nintendo if you're a Nintendo fan.
Well, this is something that's very, very easy to make jokes about in like a meme kind of way. So you make one image of like Mario with a power-up lock where it's like $5 for a mushroom, $1 for a fire flower, and then you put that on the internet and everyone sees it and it's like, oh, this would be horrible if Nintendo did this. So it has a lot of it's very portable as sort of a negative meme, if you will, to make fun of a company like Nintendo or any company for doing microtransactions. But when they transitioned into DLC, they didn't screw us over there, and so maybe that's a good sign that they won't screw us over when they transition into this kind of game as well. They've been very responsible so far, and I'm very proud. So.
Yeah, I mean, if they continue to do what they're doing with their handhelds and their consoles, and then they just have this thing on the side where maybe DeNA is handling the majority of smart device development, then I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, because then it just brings them more revenue. It's
very likely that in the short term, we will see, you could continue to play your dedicated consoles and see no adverse effect. Now, there's going to be a lot of contingents of people that will like to just be angry at the fact that they are sort of stepping out of this, not holy ground, but people sort of think of dedicated gaming as like the good gaming, and then there's mobile gaming. And so there's going to be the tendency for people to get really upset at the fact that they're even branching out into a place that is sort of thought about as dirty amongst hardcore gamers. But will it actually affect us in our day-to-day gaming lives? I strongly doubt it. I don't think, even if Nintendo stopped making consoles forever and went into mobile development, I think there would be plenty of great games to play all the time if you wanted just to ignore all of that. So there's nothing horrible that's going to happen from this in the short term anyway.
Yeah, and the good thing is that we know Nintendo is working on a brand new system.
Yes, that was a brilliant segue.
Thank you. I'm usually very bad at segues.
That was a good one. It was very natural.
And now I just destroyed the segue by pointing out that it's a segue.
Well, the segue I would have used is like, what's your favorite two letters of the alphabet? I like N and X. Speaking of N and X, that's what they've codenamed their console. So,
yep.
What about this?
It's very interesting, and I think it was a very smart move for them to announce that they're working on a new console, even though we basically all knew that something was coming anyway.
It's not a surprise to us, but it's an affirmation, or it's a reaffirmation of them saying, hey, we still really like dedicated consoles. We want to remind you that we're not stepping out of that anytime soon, and we're going to prove it by saying we have a new console coming, and we'll talk about it next year. So it's a nice way to sort of simultaneously appease the investors and then people like us for sort of a public image way, or in a public image sort of way.
Exactly, and I should probably correct myself because I said console, and it's not necessarily a console because what was said is that it's a brand new dedicated game platform.
So Iwata he's mincing words here. What does that mean?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of talk online today that people are speculating that it's either going to be a hybrid of a Nintendo console and a handheld, or just going to be something that replaces the Wii U. But I'm not necessarily sure that it's either of those, because I think there's at least a small possibility that it's the 3DS successor.
It very well could be, but with all of the rumors about hybridization, is it possible that, I mean, I've heard this thrown around a couple of times, they come out with the 3DS successor first, and then your Wii U successor, quote-unquote, is effectively that, but the console side of it, and they still connect up, and they're still the same console. They're just going to sort of stagger the release of both halves, if you will. That very well could be what you end up with,
I think that might be possible, because Iwata has basically talked about how they want their platforms to share the same type of architecture.
Yep, and it'll be more convenient for them, because when it comes down to it, having to split their development resources among two consoles has... You could argue that it has, if not destroyed, significantly impacted the Wii U's potential as a high-selling console, because if they had all the games on one platform, if you had all the 3DS and all the Wii U games basically as, if you consider them as one collection on one console, that's a crap load of games. But having to split them up really, I think I like that they split them up. I like having separate consoles, but in a business sense, it's hard not to see that having to allocate resources to both sides is, I think, probably hurting them overall.
Yeah, I just don't think they're going to combine what they're doing on the handhelds and consoles just yet.
It could go
into one system.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if, a year from now, I listened to this again and it turned out, no, they just announced a normal new handheld, and there's no, it's stuff like that always happens. So I've generally learned the hard lesson that anytime you speculate, you will be wrong.
Yeah, so we're probably both wrong.
Exactly, but it's fun to speculate, so we might as well. The more interesting thing here is just, I find it fascinating how aggressive Mr. Iwata has been. When he speaks on these subjects, he seems like he's taking a very intelligent, wide-angle, long-term view of their company and sort of what they want to do. And it really doesn't feel as, it's not quite as, I guess you might say, cynical as Pokemon Shuffle or Steel Diver Sub Wars, stuff like that, where they've kind of leaned into this sort of place, or there's the Pokemon TCG for iPads or iPhones or whatever, where they aren't really committing. They're just kind of half-assing it because they don't want to commit. This is a full commitment, it feels like. This is it's a big paradigm shift for them, and I'm happy with that.
Yep. I feel like no matter how all this turns out, this is going to be a very big day in Nintendo's history.
We'll see. Or it'll crash and burn, and then DeNA will lose all their money, and Nintendo will just go back to being normal. So Nintendo has a good safety net, so I think they'll be okay.
If that happens, there goes the website.
There goes the website. You can make DeNA everything, or DeNAeverything.com.
I don't think I'd like that.
Oh, you might not like it, but you might have to. You'll just be grasping onto straws for old Nintendo memories that have now been morphed into free-to-play Mario games, and actually they won't make any more Mario games. It'll be all Steel Diver Sub Wars and Cat Trap spin-offs.
Oh, God.
Yep.
All right, well, I think we've said enough on all these topics, but again, it was a very important day for Nintendo, I think, and we want to know what you guys think. Leave a comment either on YouTube or on the website, nintendoeverything.com. And Austin, thank you so much for joining me. It was nice having you back.
You're welcome. I'm excited to hear you and Dan. I'm sure you'll touch on this briefly, at least, in this weekend's Just a Chat. So Dan, unless Dan already has a way. If you do one. But you should. Nintendo, if you're hearing this, thank you for putting up the Let's Tap theme song from the beautiful ProPay Wii game Let's Tap. I listen to it all the time on your channel. You have the best quality one.
All right, guys, on that note, we will talk to you later.
On that weird, obscure Wii reference note, we will talk to you later.
Yep. See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Let's tap, future tapping game. Let's tap and let's tap, future tapping game.
Let's tap, future tapping game. Let's tap and let's tap, future tapping game.